Now, let's talk about career resilience.
Mm-hmm.
That is very important in today's business tumult, job insecurity. If there's one person who knows how it feels to get down and get back up in the business world, I think that's you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree?
Kind of. Monica, for you all listening, is referring to the fact I was fired from Citi after working there for the same gentleman for 15 years, and I was quite surprised. In hindsight, I should have been so surprised because he and I had not been getting along for many years. He called me up to his, we had a management meeting. He called me up with John Reed, sat me down, and wanted to make some changes. And I went home that night, but what I did learn is that it was my net worth in the company, not my self-worth. And while it hurt me, I was fine as a person. And I told my kids I'm okay. But the lesson is, it does hurt, and all of us in life have to get over a little bit, and it's okay to suffer and get depressed and maybe blame the world for a while, but at one point you have to get up and move on. And also, I think, look at what you did wrong, because usually it takes two in something like that. So I think it's just an honest way of assessing it.
Not only were you shocked, the world was shocked when you were fired, because you had been instrumental with Sandy at American Express, at Travelers, and then at Citigroup.
Right.
So, but then it took you a while to find a job, Jamie Dimon.
Yeah.
Look at you. It took like a year. And what were you doing? How unsettling was that year?
It wasn't that unsettling. So I think I was fired in November. It took me months to negotiate out. In the middle of that, they took away the office they'd given me, so I had to go set up an office, which is a little nasty thing to do. But at that point, it was like March or April. I decided, I'm just going to enjoy the rest of the summer. Took the family on a leisurely trip around Europe for fun. And when I got back in September, my office was set up, and I started to think seriously about what I wanted to do. I had lots of people calling me. I took every phone call respectfully, some for things I wasn't going to do. I toyed with starting a merchant bank. A bunch of people wanted to partner with me or something like that. I got calls to run a big international investment bank. I visited the folks in London. I said, I cannot work at that company. And a couple of smaller companies offered me jobs. I could have written a book. I could have taught, and things I might eventually do anyway. I could have retired, but I decided I wasn't done yet.
You were young.
But I wanted to try my hand at running a big company and try to be successful. So Jeff Bezos and I got to meet, and he was looking for a president, and I didn't follow up on that, but I love Jeff Bezos. He's been a friend ever since. That was like a bridge too far for me. And then I had the two big ones that were available. Home Depot. I love the people. I love the culture. Actually, I saw Arthur Blank the other day. I love Ken Langone and Bernie Marcus, who recently died. When I went down there, I told him I had dinner with the three of them. I said, I have to confess, until you guys called me, I'd never been in a Home Depot. And then I had Bank One. But and I had to move my family. It was a troubled company, but it was a thing I knew, or mostly knew. I didn't know all of it, but I'd grown up in that
You'd
world.
grown up in the financial
world. If you're playing
world.
tennis your whole life, it's hard to go play lacrosse, and so.
And in fact, your grandfather and your father were both stockbrokers.
That's correct.
You had grown up in the business.
I'd grown up in the financial world, and Travelers Citi were all financial companies, and
And
the fact that it was trouble didn't bother me that much, because I kind of always have this mindset, like just don't complain like a child. Take what you got and make the best out of it. So I put half my money in the stock the day I got there, and people know I was truly vested. The investors knew, the people there knew, and so all the decisions I was making, people knew it was as an owner too. So.
I remember visiting you in Chicago at Bank One. You bought a house there. You were all in, but at the beginning, was it a little bit isolating, or felt that because you're such a New Yorker?
Totally. I used to always make a joke that they never believed I was going to move to Chicago. And I said, and the press would ask me all the time, I said, I've moved.
We drove by your house.
My kids are going to schools here.
Yeah.
So I used to always make a joke that when I die, if I die in Chicago and they ship my ashes back to New York, they're going to say, see, we told you wasn't committed to Chicago.
But that would be the right place for you.
Exactly.
Okay.
But it was very isolating. It's really odd when you walk in a room. I met 6 directors. So my first meeting there, was a board meeting, so I met the other 14 or 18. There were a lot of directors. And then they leave, and it's like the head of HR says, well, I'm going to show you your office. And they had one in the corner. I didn't want the one in the corner. I wanted the one right in the middle of the action.
Of course
and
you
I said,
did.
well, can I meet the management team? And they kind of come into a room, shook their hands. I had called a cup of coffee. They said, Jamie, just so you know, we don't drink coffee in this room. It's got this beautiful white rug.
OMG.
I looked at the coffee. I looked at them. I looked at the coffee. I looked at them. I said, you do now. That was my first Bank One executive decision.
Coffee in the room with the white carpet.
Right.
Okay. Now, then you were very successful at Bank One, so much so that J.P. Morgan Chase bought Bank One. I think one of the biggest missions in doing that was to get you, Jamie Dimon.
Yeah.
I think that was pretty well known.
I wouldn't say we were very successful. I think we turned the company around and we're becoming an okay company.
Oh, gotcha.
And the stock price had gone from, I'm going to say 21 market cap from something like 21 billion to 50 billion. And they had a little bit of a tougher time, and we merged. Okay, we got a premium, but we merged, and I had quite a bit of control when we merged. So because the board was 8 and 8, and I was going to become the CEO
Right.
in 18 months or 24 months, unless 75% of the board didn't want me,
Oh, wow.
which means I was going to become CEO. So
Okay.
yeah.
That was not going to happen anyway. Now, today at J.P. Morgan Chase, you lead probably the most important and impactful, integral to this economy company in the United States. When you are out now and talking, do you realize the world watches every action of J.P. Morgan, and every utterance by you is watched closely? What kind of pressure is that?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure that's true. I don't try to yap all the time about my opinions about stuff because, and I watch lots of other people too, by the way, because I'm learning from them. With how they see the world, what they're doing. But look, when you talk publicly, you try to be a little careful. You try to be honest, but a little careful.
Mm-hmm.
Try to say things very specifically that you mean, as opposed to, too many words. You confuse people.
Agree.
What you mean.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and the other thing I do, if you listen to what I talk about, there's usually a reason why I'm doing something. It's not just to get on CNBC and give you my view of the economy, which I really generally don't like doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's because we're in a new city and we're expanding. It's because we started a new program to reach out to this community, or we started a new investing program. So I always try to do it around a reason. Some of that reason is, I think the most important is public policy for the United States of America. And that I do quite deliberately, to just try to help our country.
Exactly.
Right.
And I mean, even the president, Trump, says he listens to what you're saying, and all the places around the globe are paying attention to you. How does that influence the way you manage? Or does it?
It doesn't influence the way I manage. It does influence subjects we're willing to take up.
Okay.
And so, we do spend time about what issues are relevant to J.P. Morgan. Where do we have expertise? I don't spend a lot of time commenting on healthcare policies, though we might on some, because some are generic, like transparency of pricing.
Yes.
But we spend quite a bit of time like what we're going to get involved. So we started, an Asia Pacific strategy group because we know how important trade is going to be and our relationship with Asia in general, but China specifically. We have what we call a Defense Action Forum, looking at what are the things we need to do to make sure America has all the supplies it needs to be prepared for war. We started a geopolitical strategy group because a lot of our clients are asking advice.
Right.
Help us navigate this new geopolitical world. So, we spend a lot of time figuring out what we're going to get involved in, how we get involved in. And of course, we get dragged in stuff by the Congress, whoever
Right.
Subpoenas you.
Now, just to, before you took over J.P. Morgan and you were still with Sandy, you worked as his right hand for so long until, as we talked about, he fired you. What did that teach you about managing a giant company?
Yeah. Look, I mean, if you look at our history, Sandy's and mine, that we bought a lot of companies. So we started with commercial credit. We bought another consumer finance company. We bought Primerica, which had 4 insurance companies, Smith Barney, and a bunch of other stuff. Then we bought Part of Travelers. Then we bought All of Travelers. Then we bought Shearson. Then we bought Solomon. So, and it was eclectic.
It was a legendary deal-making machine.
It was a deal-making machine, and we ran the businesses well. They didn't know how to have a strategic fit, and I knew that. But you can do a great job for shows just by having a conglomerate, just running each company well. Each company, had a huge amount of risk associated with it. like in insurance companies, and I mean, hell, we had satellite risk, and so I was always looking at where's the risk, how bad could it get, how we can handle it, and we had to run it. You had to learn how to manage it, systems, people, ops, marketing, products. So you got pretty good at that, and I did a lot of the day-to-day stuff, and I was a fanatic about the numbers and the risk and stuff like that, very detail-oriented.
But you still are, aren't you?
I still am, yeah.
Even
I do
as the
less of it
chairman and CEO here.
Yeah, but I do less of it today because I know all the people. They're doing a good job. I don't have to duplicate what they do.
Do you remember that? I know your mother, who knew Sandy and his wife Joan, your mother sent one of your papers to Sandy, and he was like, "Can I pass this around?" Do you remember your brash reaction to him?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
I think it was brash. I'd written a paper on the merger of Shearson and Shearson, Hamill, and Hayden Stone.
Right.
And my mother gave it to Sandy Weil, who I don't think I'd met yet, and he sent me back a note saying, "Can I use it? I love this paper." I said, "Yeah. Is eventually you have a summer job?"
Exactly. So you asked for a job. I think that was kind of like bold.
Yeah. I mean, I was basically doing, I'm going to say, data entry, entering budget numbers. It was a summer job, entering budget numbers. And but I did get to meet him that summer. And I remember him being kind of impressed because I was at a meeting, and if I remember correctly, there were 450 branches. And someone said, "All the branches make money." And I said, "No, they don't. There are 4 that don't. Portland, this one, that one, and that one."
And you said that as an intern.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's so like you, though. I think of some hallmarks of your leadership from then to now. And I think about you lead with heart, humility, and also I think a little bit of a lot of curiosity and a little bit of listening, surprisingly, because I think everybody wants to hear what you have to say. Do you agree with those as hallmarks of your management style?
Somewhat. I think, first of all, listening is important. I tell people here, when I go to a meeting, I've done the pre-read, and they get 100% of my attention. And I listen, and I mostly will ask questions that, to dive deeper, to understand it deeper, to, if you're trying to find the so what or what you're going to do. And I love the fact you brought up heart and curiosity. And, yeah, I mean, how you treat people. People don't want to work for people they don't respect. They don't want to work for people they don't trust. They don't want to work for people who don't care. And they know whether that's true or not. And that's true. That heart is how you treat, from people who clean your bathrooms and waiters to how you treat CEOs, and it's respectful. And even when we do certain bus trips and stuff like that, you're learning a tremendous amount from the tellers and the branch managers who still know more about what goes on in a branch than I'll ever know. So curiosity is a form of humility, and it's a form of constant learning. And heart is kind of the same thing. David Novak, who I know you know David Novak,
yes.
Always used to talk about recognition, and you realize that recognition isn't just saying you did a great job, but it's also saying I didn't. Huh. You did something. You figured it out, and it's also a form of recognizing what they did, the detail of what they did. So, I think those things are critical to management, and I think people don't do some of that. You don't have a culture to company.
And one thing that I've always done is work on having a great EQ as well as IQ, and I feel like you are exactly the same.
Yeah. I think we just spoke about is mostly EQ, and look, you wrote a book. You know how hard that is, but like communicating well, that's hard. And I probably underestimated the value of that when I was younger, and now I know how important it is. But it's also very respectful because I have to, that great quote. "I'm sorry I wrote you such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one." But the short one's respectful. I've really thought it through.
Yes.
I've laid it out for you. Jeff Bezos has his 6-page memos. They're quite good. We do a lot of it here today too. And so all the EQ is communications, earning trust, showing up, seeing treating people differently. Some people react very differently to how you talk to them.
Can you actually alter your behavior for that?
Yeah.
Because you are a very strong person with a strong management style.
Yeah, but my mother's a Freudian, okay, so I learned that early on. No, but like, I'll just give you one little thing. I remember during the crisis, I was on the phone, like 2007, kind of being a little harsh on the phone on Saturday. My 3 daughters were listening to this. 2 of the daughters were completely fine. One of my daughters broke crying.
Oh my gosh, hearing you on the phone, because you were so...
Are you angry at them? Are you going to fire them? And the point is, people react differently. It's the leader's job to see that
Yes.
and to act appropriately. You're not going to avoid the subject. You just do it slightly differently. And if you have a room of people, you have people who are introverts and extroverts and on the various scale of autism, but you want to reach all of them. You want everyone to feel that they can contribute to the company to the best of their ability. And that's the leader's job, to see enough of that they create the environment where people feel free to contribute.
Now, you mentioned the bus tour, which is an annual event for you. And this year you went through the South.
Yep.
And what are the lessons that you learn by being very hands-on in your branches?
Yeah. So I've always done road trips, usually by airplane. And they're often the same, but the bus trip is different after we bought WAMU in 2012. We said we're literally going to take a bus. We're big in California, and we're going to go from Seattle to San Diego and off the beaten path. So I obviously go to LA a lot and San Francisco, but Sacramento, some of the inland towns, ending up in San Diego. Went to a military base in San Diego and visited, wounded veterans, and you learn a tremendous amount. When we get in the bus, we tell people you get beer and immunity. And these are branch managers and tellers and mortgage loan
officers. They get beer and immunity.
Like say
whatever they
you
say.
Want. We play music. We tell them to lay it on us. We make lists of the mistakes we're making, which are a gift. We do the same thing with clients. They could be small business clients, consumer clients, CEO clients. We have CEO dinners. We do big town halls, and we've done big call centers, and we learn a tremendous amount. It's also tremendously respectful. Like I've never been in a town, any town, where the people just don't appreciate you showing up and actually caring, doing things,
right.
Me with the local press, making some philanthropy there, hiring locally, and they love it. And so, it is a sign of respect. We learn a tremendous amount. We learn a lot from the clients, because, clients, some of these clients will tell you, well, you guys aren't doing as well as so-and-so in this product or this service. And I tell people that's a gift. Write it down and fix it. So when you get back to headquarters, we have a long list of things that we learned that we want to do slightly differently.
Let's talk bigger picture. Business and geopolitics have gotten so complicated and so real. How does that change what you're doing, or does it? I mean, the issue is we think there's so many things hitting this economy, but it doesn't seem to be really hitting the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
What's your view?
Yeah, I think you better be careful on that one, because some of these things have long cycles, so we don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
People are expecting these things to happen right away, but actually a lot of them haven't happened. Like even the tariffs that quote started today actually doesn't happen until ships that were filled today get here in a month.
Yes.
Okay, so there's you're not gonna see all these things, and the immigration effects we don't know, and the big beautiful bill we're not quite sure. So I'm a little patient looking at that, and hopefully it won't be that damaging. But I think geopolitics dwarfs that. And I think, so one is like what it does to JP Morgan. JP Morgan can handle recessions and all these various scenarios. I always want to make sure we can handle the full range of scenarios: good, bad, ugly, stagflation,
right.
Whether or not you think they're going to happen. And so, but I do think the geopolitical issue and the global economic issue are significant in terms of keeping the world free and safe for democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have doubled down on getting involved in policies that we think will help America and help the free world. And those are around a lot of public policy issues: affordable housing, better growth strategies, issues that if the government doesn't deal with, people aren't going to trust the government. That could be anything from immigration to education to FAA. There's a lot to do to make the country healthier.
You're even thinking about the FAA?
Well, yeah, and I read about it, but the FAA doesn't do a particularly good job. The people are dedicated, but we don't have modern systems.
Correct.
And that means it's more expensive and it's not as safe.
Yes.
And it also,
a scary thing.
It also burns a lot more CO2 because the planes can't kind of go directly in like they do in most areas now. And so, I guess my point is, I'm gonna call China, I'm not calling them adversary, but at least a strong competitor, and they are a military power.
Mm.
And they have a lot of strengths and weaknesses, which I don't have to go through here. But I'm not as afraid of them as them. We got to get our act together, grow our economy, make sure we have the strongest military. Those things will keep us strong. They'll keep us the reserve currency. We'll be ahead of everyone in innovation and growth and things like that. And I think that's quite doable. But not if we don't change the permitting system, not if we don't fix our schools, not if we don't fix our healthcare system, not if we don't fix. So yeah, we are now much more engaged in what can we do to help those things? I wrote about that in my chairman's letter. I laid some out, gave some ideas how to fix some of them.
Your chairman's letter is a must read every year. I agree with that. Are you now pushing pause on your expansion with all this tumult going on, or are you still growing?
Yeah, it hasn't changed any plans we have. So we're the same strategy to grow overseas, to grow bankers, to grow branches here, to invest in new technology. And whether we had a recession or not, that wouldn't change anything, literally. It might trim your sales a little bit somewhere, or particularly where you might think you might have too much added risk, but generally doesn't change anything. And because if you look at the geopolitics, the negative on the economy would be something like stagflation.
Right.
And we can handle that. But America is still going to grow, and America still is, is still the most prosperous nation the world's ever seen, is still the investment destination for a lot of, investors around the world.
Do you think about moving forward? Do you think about what's going to happen in the banking industry? I mean, some industries like airlines are now just dominated by very few.
Yeah.
In the United States, we have thousands of banks. Will that stay?
No.
Should it stay?
No, there are 4,000 or 5,000 banks here, and I'm not sure the American public knows that most countries have a handful, 5 or 10. And Germany is an exception, but if you go to Canada, Japan, Australia, France, Germany, UK, they're all much more consolidated. It is a very high-cost business, so there are reasons to consolidate. So I think you will see a considered consolidation. The reason what people didn't know is that in the United States until 1980 or so, you could not do interstate banking.
Right.
You were in one state. And some states had rules you can only be in one city. And the old first Chicago, which is part of this bank, you can only have one branch in Chicago. Okay, so it's a very big branch. When those laws changed, people started to merge, but mergers are hard, culturally, financially, systems, technology.
I know you've lived through a lot of that.
Yeah, I've lived through a lot, but a lot of mergers fail, but there's still economic logic to do it. But I should point out, it's not for every bank. There are a lot of community banks, a lot of small banks. They'll do a great job. They have good returns. They know their clients. They have specialties.
Do you think they should survive, the little tiny banks?
Many will survive. You know why? Let me just give you an example why.
Why?
You have a branch in a small town somewhere, but will they have a CRM system like you were at Salesforce? Probably not. But you know what their CRM system is?
Their brain.
Their head. Because you walk in, they know
that.
your family, they know your kids, they know where you go to school, they know your business. If you need a credit card for your kid, they'll drop it off at your house on the way home. So that very high level of service. They know the local real estate. They know the value of a local lease. So and some do quite well. If you look at the financial results of banks, it isn't true that all the big ones do well and the small ones don't. There are a lot of small ones who do quite well because they're so good at what they do. And
you are the biggest bank by far, and are now the size. You are the size of your biggest 3 competitors combined. So, can you buy any more banks? Can you go pick and choose some more to go?
We cannot. We're not allowed to buy a bank in the United States of America. We could overseas if we wanted to, but I probably wouldn't. I think we're in a very fortunate position is that we can grow organically. State by state, branch by branch, consumers, credit cards. We have Chase UK now. If you look at the global economy is growing. The sophistication of business is growing. Almost every single country. You can look at the populations, the education, the growth, the amount of American multinationals doing business in Peru, Colombia, all over Europe, Latin America, is growing, and we bank a lot of those people. And one of the things about the big banks is, if you're a small bank, you can't do the things we do in 100 countries. We move $10 trillion a day. We have huge systems to do that, huge cybersecurity.
And you have 87 million customers around the world?
We have 87 million U.S. consumers.
Oh, my goodness.
I think there's like 12,000 corporations, 6,000 investors. But we also bank cities, schools, states, hospitals, sovereign wealth funds, governments. So we bank governments around the world. If you look at, Pakistan so we did the bond deal. And so we advise governments and ratings. We help sovereign wealth funds, of which, that's a huge amount of money in sovereign wealth funds today.
Right. Now, given your 3 biggest competitors, one of them is Wells Fargo, which is now run by someone you mentored, right?
A buddy of mine, yeah.
Charlie
I hired him when he was 21.
Can you believe it?
Yeah. And I'm very proud of him. He just took them through a very difficult time. And I congratulate him. And I think, the other thing, counter what other people think, I think it's good.
But you still compete with him.
No, I know, but I think it's bad for the system. I'm not the same. I look at it a little bit differently. When Credit Suisse failed and Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic, some people say it's great, we gauge you. I say it's terrible. Banks are going to be questioned. I'd rather we don't have failures of banks. And I think, Wells, obviously they were handicapped, but there's, all the rules and regulations, which are totally unfairly put on them, by the way. But and maybe that helped us a little bit, but it's not good for the system. We'd rather have healthy banks compete in a healthy way than have, a crippled bank that people point out that the banks still haven't fixed themselves. It reflects poorly on all of us.
Let's shift gears. In the 20 years you have been here at J.P. Morgan Chase, you have faced death not once, but twice. The first time was your advanced throat cancer, and we were both treated at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center because I had advanced breast cancer. And I know that how hard that was to tell my child. I'm sure to talk to your children about and to face that. Talk a little about that.
Yeah, that was a
What?
Yeah, it's hard to do. Look, you've been through it. I mean,
You've been through it.
When someone says to you, you have cancer, I mean, it is a punch in the face. I mean, and it's an amazing thing because a lot of people get cancer, and for some of you think it's not going to be you.
Yeah.
And then your mindset quickly changes to, well, of course it's me.
And why not me?
And why not me?
Yeah.
And then you have to go through, it's a journey because then you're doing biopsies, and then you're doing this, and you know how bad it is. You have tons of tests, and then you have to wait for the treatment. Meanwhile, you want the treatment, at least for throat cancer, was terrible. But the hardest part was telling the kids.
Same with me.
And I didn't know how to do it, and I started, and I didn't want to scare them, and I said, I need to tell you guys something, and they're all
and then they're like, what?
They're all yapping, and all of a sudden they quiet down because they see you're actually being quite serious. I said, but before I tell you, I just want to tell you, I am going to be okay.
Yeah.
And then there's a complete silence. And then you tell them, and it's hard.
Exactly. But then, a few years ago, you had life-threatening heart surgery.
Yeah.
You had a major heart incident, and as they were...
It's something that a lot of people don't survive.
Exactly. And you knew, I think, when you were being rolled into the operating room, that you were going to have a 50-50 chance to make it off that table.
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah.
Okay, so what was going through your mind as you were going into that surgery?
Oh, God. Well, obviously, my family, they weren't there yet because...
well, you had to rush straight in to the hospital.
Pretty much, yeah. I was very lucky because I called my doctor at 5. It's like felt someone stuck a knife in my heart. I thought I heard my aorta rip. I mean, and my doctor's very smart. He said, get your wife, get in a cab, get to this hospital, have a cardio guy there. The cardio guy diagnosed it properly. There's usually often a misdiagnosed with aortic dissection. And one of the best surgeons in the world was available that morning, Len Girardi, who I was in surgery for 7 or 8 hours. I told my wife to call a board member and tell them exactly what the diagnosis is.
That's what I'm going to ask you. Don't you, if you are going to be out and may not make it out of the surgery, J.P. Morgan must be notified.
They were.
Okay.
I told my wife, call the general counsel. Judy
Uh-huh.
did it. Call the general counsel, call the lead director, and tell them what I have, like specifically, so they can make a decision what they need to do. And they did appoint 2 acting CEOs at the time, Gordon Smith and Daniel Pinto. And I thought it was about 50-50, but being wheeled in, I wasn't like having any lifelong regrets, literally.
Really? Did you actually think, what could I have done, or have I done everything I need to if I died today?
A little bit. A little. Sometimes I didn't have, people say they have these regrets with being wheeled in. I did when I wheeled in, because I asked the doctor recently, I just saw him a couple weeks ago. I said, I remember being wheeled in. I wasn't completely conscious. And there's a huge operating room. There had to be 20 people in there. And I hadn't been sedated yet or anything like that.
And then you're like,
I said to him, I just want to thank you all, whatever happened for...
Oh, you did? You had the thought to say that?
Yeah. And I wanted to give all the nurses, if you've been in ICUs, the nurses are just fabulous.
Yes.
And I wanted to give them all a gift, but the hospital won't let me.
Oh.
So except I got them a new refrigerator food. And back then it was still COVID. It was just the beginning of COVID. I got them that machine that sanitizes and charges the batteries in phones. Yeah.
That's funny. Now, how has that changed the way you live, having 2 near-death experiences?
Well, in some ways, not at all, which is I love what I do, and that didn't change. Some people do. They say, I'm not doing what I do anymore. I'm changing. I use the word, I got this from someone else who wrote it in Australia, by the way, a woman called Julia Baird, who had cancer, that it made her live much more deliberately. I think that is definitely true. And you don't assume you're going to live forever. I mean, it's like I tell people, everyone knows they're going to die. The people who've had near-death experiences know it better. Because
Right.
it was facing you right here,
Right.
and you had to deal with it every day, that you may not survive this. And like the hot thing, even after I got out, they said, you're not out of the woods yet. You got to wait and see.
That must be hard for you, though.
Yeah, well,
Not to.
being,
You're so hands-on as a
being
leader.
in an ICU is humbling to wake up hooked in. I didn't realize how many things I was hooked into, and you're being taken care of like a child.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
It's humbling, but it's also sweet because the people taking care of you are just angels,
And they're
and
devoted.
they're experts at what they're doing.
Exactly. I know family means everything to you. And we hear so much about how do working moms and handle motherhood and working. However, I think you're an inspiration as a working dad. And how do you tell other working dads to do this? Because you have been hands-on, I think, with your 3 girls that I've known since I've known you. They were little, now they're grown. How have you approached being a working dad? And what lessons should you give other working dads?
I'll answer the question. It doesn't mean I did it all right. I just learned during the process. First of all, without my wife, it wouldn't be possible. What I did is I did my work and I did family. So you didn't see me in black ties. I didn't, if I went to play tennis, which I did on a Saturday, I always did it with the kids, even when they were 6. So I dropped, I stopped watching a lot of sports on TV. I didn't play golf. All these things. So I did the both. I wanted to do the both well. And so, but my daughter said to me, Dad, when you say that, you always forget a couple of things. I said, you should have more hobbies. I said, no, I have hobbies. We barbecue. I love history. I love wine. We like hiking together. We take family trips together. She said, but Dad, you made sacrifices. Don't make it sound like people that you didn't make sacrifices. You made sacrifices with friends and time and other things. I said, okay, well, I never felt I was sacrificing anything, but
that's what you wanted to do.
You can do it. You just have to treat the family part like you treat anything else. You should put them on your calendar. You should do it. And like any good worker here, I wouldn't know if they're not here because they're at a kid's soccer game or if they went to see a client. If they're doing a great job at the company, it doesn't matter. And COVID, COVID was terrible for everybody, but one of the lessons was people, particularly caregivers, need more flexibility. That's not the same as work from home. But if you have a sick father or a sick mother or a sick child or something like that, it's okay. You don't have to count the days. They're doing a great job. They're a great employee. They should get the time, and so we have much more flexibility around things like that too.
Now, on your family,
and of course, all the companies have gone to full. We don't call it paternity, but second caregiver gets the same 16 weeks. And
oh, you have.
We do, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's important.
Right.
Now, which do you view as your most important legacy? Your family or J.P. Morgan Chase, or are they equal?
Well, it'll be the family at the end of the day. They go on. They'll have their own careers. They may change the world in a way I may never see. And right next, I always say my hierarchy of values is family, country, J.P. Morgan. But J.P. Morgan is also my main contribution to the world. So my contribution to the world is my family and also what I do here. If I do a good job at J.P. Morgan, I can help individuals, I can help employees, I can help customers, I can help communities, I can help my country.
Well, that's why it is going to be your legacy. Even though you say family is more important, when I'm walking around the building, there are all these quotes from J.P. Morgan, inspirational quotes. Right. I think we could fill it with inspirational quotes from you.
Yeah, maybe, but
when's that going to happen?
Families to be the most important. I may write a book one day.
Yeah. Okay.
But I wanted to. I started, and my board said no. As long as we're paying you,
focus on this job.
On this job.
Okay.
But at one point, I have the papers together. As you know, I write a lot.
Yeah.
So I have. It shouldn't be too hard to do.
Now you are surrounded by strong women. your wife Judith, you met at Harvard Business School, your 3 daughters. Then you had all these grandchildren. All were girls.
Yeah.
I think even your dog was a girl. And then suddenly a boy grandchild arrived.
You're missing one. My mother, who was...
Oh, your mother.
who-
and I knew your mother. I loved your
you
mother.
did, who was a Spartan. And my mother was quite tough.
Yes.
A loving mother, but
She was great.
She was tough, yeah.
Yes, I did.
And she was a Freudian, so she was always the why. Why did they do that? I would say, I don't care why they did it.
Okay, now that shaped how you are, but also your mother, but your Greek immigrant grandparents
Yeah.
shaped you.
And my grandmother was tough too, yeah.
Okay, so how does being the grandson of Greek immigrants affect the way you are, or does it?
You know, honestly, I never thought about it until after my parents died. So
And they died right in this, like within a week or two of each other.
The same day.
Oh, I knew it was so
in
close.
each other's arms, yeah,
Yeah,
at home.
best way to die
But you know,
together and at home.
if you'd asked me that question, I wouldn't have known how to answer it. I can answer it now because now time has gone by and think about it. So my grandparents, 3 were Greek immigrants, never went to high school. One was born here, never went to high school. She was half Italian, so she was a great cook. She cooked Italian and Greek for me when I was growing up. So, but the values that they had and that my parents had were pretty basic. I think the values a lot of people had, which is treat everyone properly. I mean, if I mistreated a waiter or a taxi cab driver, it was hell to pay. Or if someone was beaten up, if there's a bully beating up on someone, they expect you to help the kid being beaten up.
Yeah.
You know, at great risk to yourself. Like it was have a purpose in life. It wasn't about business or money. It was what you wanted. So, you know, my older brother's a physicist. My other brother's an educator. You know, I have a daughter who's in reporting. I have a daughter who's in healthcare. One is in banking, but the purpose, like do something and, you know, make it a better world and, you know, be a valuable citizen. And then the other one would be, probably others, but, you know, do your best.
Right.
Don't slack off.
Right.
You know, and that's learning, that's curiosity, that's you know, give it the full effort.
Now, when you hire your top 10 executives and you assemble your main executive team, what values are you looking for?
I think some of the ones we've already mentioned. I think the traditional one, look, you always want, I would say, smart and analytical, and it's important we have that. I mean, business is very complicated, but the smart is also, there's a curiosity element that you're also assessing the landscape all the time, the competition, the technology, and that's a form of curiosity, not just smart and not just analytics, that you're seeking out. I remember sending a plane of people to China, consumer banking people to China. And they were like, why are we going to China? That's a waste of time. I said, you'll find it when you're there. And they saw WeChat and Alipay and Tencent. And you learn other people doing some fascinating things. And the open mind to that. I'm going to put character and culture aside because it's a sine qua non. And I'll describe cultures a little bit. Then there's the stuff we were talking about, like heart, curiosity, soul. I'd say a little bit of grit. You know, you can have a lot of heart and a lot of soul, but to actually decide stuff, to take the pressure to make a decision, that takes kind of grit. And I'm always surprised that some people simply don't have it. They don't get stuff done.
It's shocking, isn't it?
They don't get stuff done, and I don't know exactly why. And then when you have someone who does, you know, it's great. And they may not be the best at the analyst part or the observing part, but some people are the best at synthesizing. And so all of us have all these wide variety of skills that come together in some basket of skills. But if you have honesty and you work hard and you care about people, and that's probably the most important. And then you're learning. So, you know, I don't like when someone says, we need a tech expert. We need a tech expert for tech, but, you know, what you want in a boss of a business, they better have all of this. They better have almost all of it
Now,
in some fashion.
When you interview someone for a big job, can they even talk, or are they scared half to death to be in the room with Jamie Dimon?
No, I'm very nice to them.
You're very nice.
I always start.
I was never scared interviewing you.
No, you
but
should have been, because I don't scare people, I don't think. But, you know, when people walk in a room that sometimes they see the chairman and CEO of J.P. Morgan, but, you know, within a minute or two, they were just sitting with a guy called Jamie, I usually start by asking, where did you grow up? How many brothers and sisters do you have?
Yeah.
You know, like, what did your mom and dad do? And, you know, like, what did you like? Do you play school sports? I mean, that's usually I do, and how they went things, and then, you know,
That's
the career a little
how
bit.
How they were
I want to
raised.
know about them as a person, much more I want to know. I also we also have other people interview them, which is very important to me because, you get to see people from different angles. And
Right.
I've learned a long time ago, some people are better interviewers than other people. Some interviewers are very busy making you feel good about them, so they're forgetting to actually dig deep into you. The other thing about interviewing, there's already a dossier in you. I don't have to see you to get the dossier.
Right.
Does she work hard? Is she a good writer? Is she honest? Does she show up on time? Do her peers like her? Do her subordinates like her? Does she take responsibility when she makes a mistake? Does she yell and scream at other people? Like, you can know all of that and never meet the person.
That's true.
Right.
Now, going into business is getting to be, believe it or not, even more popular. I'm now at the University of Tennessee, my alma mater.
Congratulations, yeah.
And at the Haslam College of Business, they have 1/3 of all undergraduates at the university in Knoxville want to be in business. So what does that tell you, and how do you feel about looking at business people coming out of state schools versus Ivy, like
First
you
of all,
came
I know
from?
the Haslam family, and I have great respect for them. And I think it's great that they did that, to help that school grow. And,
Right.
And the other thing which you learn about talent, there's talent everywhere, and they don't know it sometimes. They're not being given the opportunity. And it doesn't surprise me. When I travel, that book, Our Towns, James Fallows, he flew to 50 towns. When you go around the country, I saw this when I was in Birmingham and Jackson and Huntsville, and that's what people want to do. They still want to grow and expand, and they're excited about jobs. I go to HBCUs. These kids want jobs. They want opportunity. They're
Right.
not complaining like you read about, was it Gen Z, whoever. So it doesn't surprise me. But you have probably more of that in Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, than you're going to find in California, Michigan, or New York.
Right. Well, they're hungry,
Right.
and
They're
they have
hungry.
hustle.
And there's a different psyche, and they'll do better because of it.
Cool.
And
Now,
we should educate people about that. We're making a huge mistake. We don't educate people in civics, free enterprise, the things that made the country great and will continue to make the country great.
well, the Haslam family, as you know, are very entrepreneurial, and Jim Haslam built Pilot Flying J,
Yeah.
which was then purchased by Berkshire Hathaway a
Yeah.
while back. Okay, you are not afraid to challenge conventional wisdom and take a different point of view. I think about the rant that you gave on Back to the Office.
Yeah.
What motivates you to come on strong on a position like that one?
Yeah, so I'm not trying to, some people, they want to take a counterpoint of view, and they haven't really thought it through. What I'm really trying to do is figure out the truth, and then I will act on it. So I say, well, do the right thing anyway, do the right thing if it's hard, do not do the expedient thing. And sometimes people, they're blinded, they can't see it, but I want to see. So I already knew, I already been questioning people working from home for a long time. And the gentleman, I know that everyone calls it a rant, but if you listen to me, I emote, but I was very, but I very respectfully answered his question. He asked a very detailed question, and I went through how it definitely does not work for young people, because almost young people, and including everyone in this room, learned by an apprenticeship system. They were there, they saw you act, they saw you make a mistake, they saw someone on a sales call, they saw someone on a presentation. That's how you learn. And we already saw kids who are not coming in, are being left behind. And they're being left behind because they're not on the accounts. They have a much less of a social circle. They're learning slower, and you can't make up for that. And that may be some permanent lost time. And I would also add, by the way, your social skills are going to be less.
Yes.
And you're going to be married less. I mean, how do you meet people if you don't? The workplace is like far more diverse than probably where most people live at home. And a lot of jobs, it didn't work for management because I call it management by Hollywood squares. It's not the same conversation. When you look at someone and say, Monica,
Jamie,
I don't agree with that. But in Hollywood squares, you're almost saying it to 12 people. You can't see the body language. It's, I'm not being mean. I'm starting to question you a little bit. I didn't realize in some of these things, people are on their iPhone, looking at pads. They weren't paying attention.
well, that's what you said, and I do call it a rant. It was emoting, but you did go off.
I did. And I said, that doesn't work. And then getting people on Friday is hard. I said, so we very often, and also when we have a management meeting, all day long we're talking to each other. So on my floor, we'd be walking all day long saying, hey, you brought up this, we fixed that, what about this? Why don't you go talk to, constant follow-up, which you don't have on Zooms. When you're on Zooms, you tend to say, we'll pick this up next week.
Yeah.
On Friday, you tend to say, let's not do it today because so-and-so and so-and-so can't be here. It slows everything down, and it didn't work. So again, I'm trying to, the other thing, people were making excuses. We need more flexibility. That's not work from home. We need more, it works for me. That's not analysis. My people are on Zooms anyway. That's not analysis. So we actually analyzed in depth, and we said you could work 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. People were doing 2 days at home, and 3 days at home and 2 days in the office. People were not even following even the looser restrictions.
Wow.
And
so then you just had it. And it's
I
time
just
to
had
get back
it.
to business.
And the other thing, and we have by 10% permanently work from home. So I'm not against a job being from home if in fact that works for the company and the clients.
I got you.
I'm against it where it doesn't work for the company and the clients. And the other thing is, and I don't mean this in a bad way for anyone, we could build a company that way, and you may build a company a different way. And they're both okay. That's called competition. I think my company will win because we're in the office. I really do. We're in the office. And you may find out the hard way that we're right, but the fact is, it's not a moral statement.
Right.
And also, I find it peculiar when someone says to a J.P. Morgan, you shouldn't do that, but they're talking about themselves. So they don't have to come to the office. They have other choices.
That's right.
Right. So the notion that they're going to impose it upon us when we've decided it's bad for us is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about, it's an understatement right now to say there is a lot of division in this country. And sometimes people are fearful even to disagree. What is your advice on constructive dialogue?
Yeah.
Because I know that's important to you.
So it's important for everyone to know that when we take these bus trips, there's a lot less divisiveness when you go to Huntsville, Greenville, Raleigh-Durham, Austin, Spokane, Boise, Bozeman. Those communities are actually working well together. They're reaching out to their poor communities, minority communities. They're trying to improve their schools, their river walks, their job. It's not quite that bad. We all see so much, Washington, New York, CNN, Fox. That's kind of not what's taking place in a lot of part of the world. They're still growing. They're still innovating. They're still happy. They're taking care of their families, and so, but there is this divisive stuff. We try to deal with it very directly. We analyze it. We think about it. We come up with our own positions, which we've always done on climate, diversity. Of course, when the law changed, we modify if we were doing this wrong. But for the most part, we're doing stuff pretty much the right way. And so, I'll give you an example in diversity where the court said you cannot have quotas.
Right.
And basically you can't hire, promote people based on color. We never did. We didn't have quotas, but we changed certain words and stuff like that, but we still reached out to communities. So we're still interviewing at HBCUs. You can still do that. We're still reaching out to the Hispanic community with, Spanish language speaking things. We still have programs, and we got rid of some programs. But I tell them, getting rid of those programs is no different than getting rid of, they were bureaucratic and not working. We got rid of them. We do that in compliance. We do that in audit. We do that in finance. It's kind of like those things get built up over time. They don't work. You should get rid of them.
We call this show office hours. So how do you do office hours at J.P. Morgan Chase?
Yeah. Well, I'm here about half the time. So, but to me, here's the most, I'm very accessible. I return almost every phone call and every email every day. I tend not to schedule something unless you call. If you called me and said, I need to spend 30 minutes, I say fine.
Okay.
But I don't tend to set up a regularly scheduled thing in my direct reports. I know them well. They all know, just come see me if you need me. But the days I'm here, I have like white space in my calendar. So I have, set meetings, business reviews, a bunch of stuff.
And what do you do in the white space?
The door's open, and I walk around the floor. I'll stick my head in, and I've done it many times this morning already, on a bunch of issues, and sometimes back and forth. And, we set up a lunch table with a bunch of people on some specific issues. So I'm very accessible. And
so you don't really stay chained to your desk and they have to come talk to you.
No.
You like roam.
I roam. And every now and then I say,
You barge
Monica,
into a meeting.
let's have a drink at the end of the day because I want to talk to you about that. But I want to have a real conversation. It can take 45 minutes. I'll do that. Or a dinner or a lunch, and I will do that. But I don't do it regularly with every direct report. Like I said, I know some really, really well. It's almost unnecessary. They're doing a great job, and they know I'm going to call them if I think I have something to add. Right.
Yeah, you're not bashful about that. For your office hours, who would you, if you were to do it, who would you want to have a meeting with behind closed doors? What would be your ideal office hour of someone?
Dead or living?
Either.
Abe Lincoln.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Everything I've ever read about him, brilliance, IQ, EQ, how he thinks about issues, the ability to think, which all of us have, this AI thinking and knowledge. A lot of what he spoke about is hugely knowledge. He's very funny. I mean, he's an expert at using words, and there's a guy who went through the most pressure. Kept the country together under extreme circumstances.
Now, what about?
Which is why I love history. I read when I go away. I tend to read a lot of history. So
I know you do. What about an office hours with someone that was very impactful to you? What's one of your past office hours that made a difference to you?
Well, I can give you a generic one as opposed to, it's almost always the tough people decisions. When I'm trying to figure out what we need to do, and when I'm doing that, I will, and it's a little bit like I'm peeling the onion sometimes. I'll see 3 people, it makes me think about stuff, then I'll see another 3 people, and then I think about it, and then I have to go back to the first person, because it's almost like unpeeling the onion about what your choices really are, and what people really think about them, can they really do the job? So those are the ones that are probably the most important.
Let's talk about your retirement, though it's nowhere soon. But you have hinted that you would transition to being chairman at some point. Have you given a more definitive timetable
No.
on that?
No.
And who do you want to be your successor? What kind of person are you going to look for in a successor?
Yeah, that's kind of what we already said. It will be more the heart and soul and curiosity and work ethic and respect.
Not just the smartest man in the
No.
or woman in the room.
No. The really smartest person in the room is the person who gets the most out of everybody, and they may not be as smart as everybody. I mean, we have some brilliant people work here. I'm not as good at certain things as some of those people, and but they're the Pied Piper. They're the coach.
Right.
Like you've seen, and this is like a sports analogy where you've seen it takes one bad player could make the whole thing terrible.
Right.
But a great coach, sometimes they're a coach player, but a great coach is extraordinary, and it's more of that than.
Do you think that the person who succeeds you as CEO for sure will be an insider, or are you open to an outsider?
It'll probably be an insider, but as a discipline, we think about outsiders.
Okay. How will you know when the time is to hang up being the CEO?
I don't know the exact answer. It's when they are ready and it's time for me to go, and some combination of the two. I have a great relationship with all the people here. The board is likely be chairman for a couple of years, so.
Now, when you're chairman, you'll be freer to do some other things. Maybe like write your book, maybe like
probably, yeah.
take up golf.
No, I'm not going to take up golf.
Maybe play mahjong.
No.
What do you envision when you set off as the CEO? When you're no longer,
the chairman job may be a full-time job for a while, depending how it sorts out. And again, that's up to the board. And at one point, it'll be up to the new CEO too. Here's what I'm thinking today. I will write a book. I will teach. I'll come down to Haslam and teach them. I can't live down there, but I can teach them. I love teaching classes, and I assume you use the case studies and stuff like that too.
Right.
I love that kind of stuff.
Well, we want you at Haslam.
Yeah, I'll come down and teach a little bit.
Okay.
And then I'm not in any public company boards, so if I like the company, the people, I might go in one. Maybe a charitable board that needs my help. I don't want to just sit in a board for nothing. But there have been, great charities that got in trouble and they need to be fixed. So it's kind of perfect for me as a chairman. But as a chairman, get some new board members, get the strategy straight, something like that, and do business with friends. I'll get an office somewhere and buy companies, invest in companies, maybe with my son-in-laws and my daughter or something like that. I would never push them into anything, but if they said, hey, they'd love to do that with me, I'll do that. But I already have friends who are doing that. So I can't for conflict reasons, but I can start something like that probably pretty quickly.
What about Jamie Dimon jumping into journalism? Do you have some thoughts about that?
I do.
Tell us about that.
So let me start with the most important thing. Journalists educate the world. And they educate the influencers, and those influencers are senators, congressmen, governors, but equally importantly is their staff. So all these people read these things. And I'm a great supporter of journalism. I complain sometimes because too much clickbait, too much repeating stuff what isn't true. But I think that's important. So I used to do these salon dinners and to let people actually talk about an issue in much more detail than when you write an article. And then also sometimes let people do the deep dives, the long form.
I used to love to do that.
Yes, well, that's what the book is, where you're not just saying student lending, you actually start giving, no, here's what went wrong, here's what we need to fix, here's what we need to change, here's who we should forgive, and why. But take a little of analysis to do that. It's not, people just want a quick answer, something like that. But that would be true about, that guy who wrote the book Abundance and Affordable Housing. Okay, well, it's true there too, but it's true on every single major policy issue faces. Like there are things that work for schools, like high schools, and things that don't work. And we don't say we have a problem. We should fix this.
Well, what would you do if you go into journalism? I know you and Jeff Bezos are close. You and Judith were at his big wedding this summer. Yeah. I don't know how the press missed you with all the celebrities there.
Well, the celebrities took all the air out of the place. But I've been a friend. I love Jeff, and I've gotten to know Lauren a little bit. And
could you all do something together? He's, in addition to founding Amazon, he's now the owner of the Washington Post.
Yeah, I speak to the Post editors every now and then. I've given him a few ideas about the Post. I think you end up with 4 global papers. The Times, the Wall Street Journal, the FT, and the Post. And I think they could all do a better job. So I'm not criticizing. When I look at it, like the U.S. papers barely cover international, or not enough of international companies. I think a lot of them have cut back. Well, not really the New York Times, nor the Post, on the long form part of it. Like let the reporters dig. Give them the time to really dig on that subject. Inform the press, the public about the real value, the real issues that take place there. So I'm in my mind. I've got some ideas about press, about help them do a better job.
Perfect.
And I can do that myself. I can help Jeff maybe, or